Good morning. To begin our gathering, let's remember we bring in our hearts, our minds, everything that's kept us up at night, and yet we still got ourselves here. The wonders and the joys of being through the holidays together. Most importantly, remembering that this is a community of connection where we share our joys and our sorrows together. There are no candles lit from the early part of gathering, but I ask, are there any who would like to share a joy or a sorrow out loud this morning that I can repeat for those at home? Madison. Your friend's cat passed away on Wednesday. We know the heartfelt connection we have to our four-legged friends. Bonnie.
I'd like to light a candle of joy for family gatherings. I was with my brother's family. There were 24 of us, ranging in age from 3 to 93.
3 to 93, Bonnie says, at their family gatherings. So a candle of joy for family gatherings this holiday season. Wonderful. Susan. Candle of joy for Jim and Sue Null from Susan Zelli and all of us to see you here. Very good. Virginia.
Candle of joy, my son is visiting from Boston.
Virginia's son is visiting from Boston. A joy to have you here. Welcome.
Light a candle for my granddaughter who's having a tough time.
Bill's lighting a candle for his granddaughter who's having a tough time. You bet. Nancy. Nancy's lighting a candle of joy for all of the family with her this Thanksgiving. Wonderful. Wonderful. And we're glad you're here. Welcome. Lisa.
A candle of joy and gratitude for people who invite other people who don't have family around to share Thanksgiving meals with them.
Oh, thank you, Lisa, for bringing this up. A candle of joy and gratitude for those who offer a space at their table for folks who may not otherwise have had a gathering for Thanksgiving. Wonderful. Generosity. Very good. All right, I'm going to light one more candle for all those things that you're not yet thinking of. Maybe thought of those who are watching from home in wherever you are, maybe on your Thanksgiving travels. And we are appreciative of all the glow of these candles and anything not yet shared, which could be shared during our coffee time together. Thank you. Thank you for entering into this space. We have just a few announcements, but first, even though I said welcome everyone and welcome to our visitors this morning, I also wanted to say, I am so happy. I am so happy to have myself come off of a week of vacation time. My in-laws said it was good that the wonderful, posh place that they have as a timeshare has lousy internet. So I was kind of on an enforced time of barely connected time. But our announcement was this morning, I went ahead and sent out the order of service first thing this morning instead of on Friday. But some people may not have noticed that for months now, we've been sending the order of service. You can pull it up on your smartphone or your tablet, or I know some people may want to print it at their home. and just to see what's going on, to follow along with the service. I just wanted you to be sure to know I have heard from those who said we have to go back to the old way of printing them. And you guys just have an awful minister. At first I was saying no because I could just imagine the ushers licking their fingers during COVID and handing out germy pieces of paper to everybody. But then really the environmentalism in me got the best of me. And so I'm just kind of like, no printed orders of service. And that's not quite true. If you are a visitor, when you're signing up for a name tag, you may notice there's an order of service there. Because visitors, you don't get our email, right? You just walk in and this is your first chance. Choir gets one. Why? Because they want to use it as a bookmark in their hymnals. It has dual use. It has dual use. I print one for myself and our worship associate. But I just wanted to announce that we are trying to balance all the needs and adjust to your cranky environmentalist minister on that. So that's the first announcement. We also have many other things coming up. We, I believe, had a slide running that said we have next Sunday a Vespers service at 4 p.m, which will be for those who are feeling grief at the holidays, more somber holidays. It seems to me as of Veterans Day, holiday music was on and everybody's singing about joy and jingle bells and angels and all of that. And this is a service, and Ginny Rush and I have sat down again a second year in a row and adjusted it a little, and Janice has provided a new piece of music video to go in there, to rotate in. Those of you who attended last year, I know it just fills a space for those of you who feel an empty spot at the table through the holidays or something. I wanted to bring that out. This is one of those ministries that I brought here as a pastoral piece. And I hope it's something, if you yourself are not interested in a Grief at the Holidays one, just invite somebody else to consider it, readings and music. We have the opposite end, in which we're going to have a campfire ring, if the weather's not like today, a weekend later, and we'll try to have a beautiful time of singing carols together. If we have to move inside for that one mid-month, what we'll do is I have a little cardboard cutout fire, and we'll eat the raw marshmallows instead of cooking them, and we'll sing around that cardboard cutout fire and have fun that way. We are in this new season, and I appreciate it. There were other announcements and things that were out there, but I wanted to bring up the things that as we're moving out of Thanksgiving and into the next holiday season, that you might feel a little bit of the ways in which we connect, and you don't have to wait all the way to solstice and Christmas Eve to begin to enter into the holiday spirit. Those are my announcements for this morning. Right afterwards, though, I am available for brunch. If there are people who are feeling like, I want to have brunch with the minister. Well, once a month or so, I announce a time to do that. I am available. Look at that. You could all bring your food and take out to a very wet picnic table, or you could be kinder than that, and we could pick a restaurant together. So I'll be hanging out in coffee time a little bit and then available. And you don't have to do that. It's just one more way in which I'm making myself available. I now invite Vanessa to come forward and start us out with the rest of the service.
Actually, I'm going to do opening words right after the introit video.
Thank you.
With a voice of joy and thanksgiving, praise to God on this holy day. With the voice of joy and thanksgiving, sing praise to God on this holy day. Sing the voice of joy and thanksgiving, sing praise on this holy day. Praise to God on this holy day, on this holy day. Praise to God on this holy
And our opening words today are from Linda Susan Ulrich. And we're going to be able to read the first line of each stanza, the first phrase of each stanza together, and then I'll continue on. Open up the doors. Push on looming wooden arches embroidered with ironwork. Brace shoulders against the weight of history unmoved. Slough off the musty smell of unused joy and stored up sorrow. Knock rust off the hinges if you need to, and let your breath precede you inside. Open the doors more. Make room for a shaft of sunlight to cross the threshold. Give the dust mote something to dance about. Peek through a single slice of possibility and name even the half-truths you see. Open the doors wider still. Pour yourself through the gap. Strut or sneak or sidle as suits you best. Cleanse whatever scrapes catch your skin and bind up the wounds that keep you from entering whole. Open the doors wider still. And now we'll open the doors as far as they will go. Draw on the strength of the stones beneath you. Ground yourself in a firm sense of who you are. Stand as a beacon welcoming the next seeker, and shine far beyond the lintel and sill. Open all that you are. Heighten and deepen your connections to the world around you. Broaden your definition of neighbor. Grow into the largest target for grace that you can muster. And pray to become a gateway for even greater love and compassion. Open up the doors, my friends, lest we keep the stranger out and condemn ourselves to prisons of our own making. Come, let us worship together. And let's begin by standing in body or in spirit to sing our opening hymn, number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Today will be a joyful day.
We light our chalice with the words of Deborah Falk, and the words will appear on the screen so we can speak together some more. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us. And we are here also in the season of Advent. In the Christian tradition, Advent is the 4 seasons immediately preceding Christmas Day. And in this tradition, the first Sunday of Advent today is the Sunday with the theme of hope.
Hope died.
This one. That one needs a little work, and the worship team did not get a chance to work on it this morning.
Switch it out with a good wick.
Hope springs eternal.
How many of you grew up with stories from school, with all of these images of what America was, that told about the myths and stories and the beginnings of our nation? How many of you learned something in school of these stories? I did. There's an old story by Washington Irving, and actually it goes back far before that. There are stories all over the world from China or other places with similar stories. Washington Irving, however, wrote down this story in the Catskills of New York. Now, you know, that looks, except it's more snowy now, that looks a lot like what we see around Brevard with the mountains and all of that. And people up in the mountains back in the old days who would brew stuff. Up in those mountains, a man walked into the mountains called Rip Van Winkle. How many of you know this story, Rip Van Winkle's story? Okay, all right. Good. I'm going to refresh it for you and condense it. It could be a really long one if we wanted it to be, but I'm going to make it short. So Rip Van Winkle was a man who really didn't want to do any useful work. Hung around at home, pretty much just sat around, had a comfortable chair, lounged around, did as little as possible. Rip Van Winkle's spouse was noticeably annoyed by this and would completely get unhinged with Rip Van Winkle not doing chores, not working, not just do something. But Rip Van Winkle just kind of like, no thanks. Finally, with all the noise from his spouse, Rip Van Winkle decided it is too noisy to sleep here. And he wandered off into the woods with his favorite dog. They'd go walking in the woods together sometimes. At least he was walking the dog, okay? There he met somebody along the way. He said, help carry this with me. I have this big vat of alcohol I want to bring someplace. And he carried it and heard thunder in the woods. And they arrived in a gap. And there were people bowling. Now, a bowling alley is often a place where young people might go for a birthday party. You might go for a club, a league. You might have fun fitting that in, but these people seem to be just up there bowling all the time. Rip Van Winkle joined them and drank the liquor and did all of that, and then fell asleep and just as usual, found a tree to lean against, fell asleep. He slept for 20 years. 20 whole years. That's an entire generation. Woke up and found he had a long gray beard. His dog wasn't there. His clothes smelled really bad. And he wandered back down to the village. And in the village, there were more houses and people than he remembered. This didn't seem right. And then he found out it had been 20 years and his wife had already died. And, oh, poor Rip Van Winkle was walking around. And while he had been asleep, the whole country had had a revolution and had gone from being a colony of England with obeisance to the King of England to now having an elected government and presidents and a whole new way of operating. Rip Van Winkle was walking around talking about his loyalty to the king and country, and people were just like, you are so out of it. Where have you been for the last 20 years? That's the story of Rip Van Winkle. That's our story of wisdom. I don't know how true that story is. I don't know all the morals of the story, but I think there are a few warnings. One is, do not spend your whole life bowling. Second, if somebody's nagging you to make something of your life, maybe you really should. Third, if you're spending most of your time asleep, maybe it's time to become woke and figure out what's changed in the world. There's our words of wisdom. We come together as folks who don't just stand around bowling and having fun. We do things for others. This is not a congregation that's ever been asleep in its 20-something years of existence. This congregation has always managed to find ways to support good things in society, change, efforts to help with growing populations with growing needs and challenges. During this time of this offering, let's remember to be thankful for having this place here in Transylvania County, having a presence of work to do. I invite you to be generous with your funds for our offering or for our special offering if you wish to take an envelope and give to the Haven. Thank you.
I gather where I did not sow, and bind a mystic sheep. The amber and the rivers flow, the rustle of the leaf. A beauty springtime never knew.
Thank you, Keem. Thank you, Sharon. What's given in love, we receive with great joy, and we say, thank you. I invite you to breathe deep, center yourself, eyes open or closed, whatever way works for you, and enter into this time of prayer and meditation. Spirit of love and life, we who are gathered here on this Thanksgiving weekend are grateful for the connections we have, the people who have opened their doors to be with us. Open their doors so that we might have a space at their table. We're grateful for the family and friends who've gathered round. We are overjoyed to see so many people appear in our midst, people we love and are connected with. Spirit of love and life, we also know that there are those who are going through hard times. Our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, our cousins and siblings, and so many. These are challenging times for some. May we remember that our hearts have enough elasticity to be able to give love and comfort and support through these times so that no one may feel that they're going through the rough times alone. Our hearts go out to those who are grieving the loss of their four-legged friends, grieving the loss of those who were not here at this Thanksgiving, will not be here through the holidays of December. Grief touches us all, and we have the empathy to know this and to reach out and hold one another. These, in the prayers of our hearts and the thoughts of our minds, we hold now in a brief silence. In the names of those known and unknown, remembered and forgotten, the names of all the helpers of humankind, we say, Amen. Blessed be. Thank you, Janice, Carlene, beautiful music. Nice to be here. The reading I have this morning is from Blue Notes, an anthology of love, justice, and liberation, edited and put together by Unitarian Universalists for the Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism group that pulled together a whole bunch of these readings. This particular one is from Matthew Taylor called The Change. I can feel the change coming, like growing pains. I feel the change in my bones, pulling me, stretching me, forming me into the true I am. Can you feel it? The change in our bodies as we adapt, grow, change, the weight shifting and molding to fit this evolving body that we are in, guided by faith that this too will pass. We can survive this because our ancestors survived. Can you feel them in your DNA? You, a mixture of their particles that was molded to fit your spirit. Change, shift, mold, grow, yet in some ways, we stay the same. This is our last Sunday of the month of the theme packet that was sent out for Soul Matters on change. I don't know how many of us were immersed in the process of looking through the questions and the exercises and thinking about change. But I was thinking about it in particularly about our ways in which, well, in what ways have we changed? In what ways are we the same? I think about it in terms of us. In terms of us as something more than Rip Van Winkle. People who are awake and don't skip out on the tough in-between of that was then and this is now. We had such lovely openings in the beginning of this service about open up the doors. Open up the doors wider still. Bring welcome. Open the doors as far as they will go. We had the chalice lighting words that we read together of Deborah Falk. It said, a chalice in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, of faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people. We had Enter, Rejoice, and Come In as our hymn. And I've been told by both Carlene and John, yeah, the congregation knows that. We can sing that. It's a good starting hymn. And it is, but it's a scary hymn. It says, don't be afraid of some change. We all have to sing that out loud. Don't be afraid of some change. And I've reminded of you of that almost every time that we've sung it. I like the history of this movement so much that my bookshelves are filled with books that are dusty, and some are crumbling with cracked bindings from being opened time and again. I love the old stories that tried to teach us some bits of wisdom. But I don't think we understand, as they might have 150 years ago, the story of Rip Van Winkle. I don't think it has the same texture to it for a 21st century American that it might have had for a post-colonial American. I'd like to say that it's something like somebody who's maybe been away from Brevard for a little bit and never driven through a traffic circle. Whoa, something's different here. And you know, I come going back and forth from Etowah, so I'm always going through the constant change, and I still want to get in the wrong lane because for so many months it was the right lane that was closed, but now it's the left lane that's closed. Change. You know, the wisdom in psychology is that change happens. That's not the hard part. The hard part is the adjustment to it. The adjustment to change. And that's the part of the Rip Van Winkle story that gets glossed over. Rip Van Winkle falls asleep while the king is still the king and wakes up when the new republic is founded and skips all the right lane, left lane shifts and changes that are going on. It's just from one to the next. We have to work through what lane to move to. To realize that as we're going along, it's more like surfing. It's more being attuned to the way the waves are going at the moment. It's less about that was then, this is now. There is some aspect of that was then, this is now. That opening from Deborah Falk that said a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance. That was a big deal phrase when I was going through theological school. Freedom, reason, and tolerance. And it's been picked apart since then with more sensitive ears of saying, why are Unitarian Universalists only about tolerance? What are we about tolerating others? Welcome everyone, we'll tolerate you here. Huh? I mean, back in the day, that was radical. We're going to tolerate you. To my ears now, that's just, folks, no. That's not enough. Can we accept one another? And then somebody told me, hey, folks, you don't just accept someone who's different. Why don't you celebrate diversity and celebrate difference? Freedom, reason, and tolerance. The reason part has been teased out a bit. What was it? Was Marge Piercy? No. Who was it who said, all the men are dancing on the ceiling? People are looking at me like, you've never read that reading to me before. All right, well, I'm going to go find it sometime and read it to you again. There's this wisdom of, if we're going to be together, we got to get people down off the ceiling. And I think that's a reference to not a distrust or dislike of being able to take the 20,000-foot view, but rather, how can we be grounded and alongside each other? There's a certain level in which, within Unitarian Universalist ministry circles at least, there's some talk about how is it our use of reason is pulling us up to a 20,000-foot view and keeping us there and not keeping us engaged, heart to heart with one another.
It's from Lionel Richie, by the way.
Lionel Richie also said that.
He had a song, Men Dancing on the Ceiling.
Excellent. More than one source of wisdom. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that person into our midst. This is good. We all come with voices, and we need to be with one another close by to hear it. I read the words of Matthew Taylor. I can feel the change coming like growing pains. I feel the change in my bones. And I've said this before, having been a parent, it helped me remind myself, and maybe if I become a grandparent, I'll be reminded again. Our bodies stretch as they grow. I don't remember what it was like to go through cell division, but I can't imagine it was easy. I just barely, because I've had kids, remembered how much it hurts when you're going through a growth spurt. The pain in your bones from all of that stretching going on, and your tendons and anything else that needs stretching too. Flexibility is important. I can feel the change coming like growing pains. I feel the change in my bones. Now, that could also be what I picked up along the lines after I broke my ankle. Here, I'm going to say this over here so that you two get to hear this. Your minister did something really unsafe as a kid. I went out into the woods, and I found a grapevine hanging from a tree. And me and my friends, we decided we were all going to be Tarzan and swing on that. And I swung and I jumped off, and my ankle landed right on a rock and went this way. And I broke my right tibia. And for years after, not so much now, but for years after, I could tell there was a change of the weather because of the ache there. Rip Van Winkle didn't feel any aches. Rip Van Winkle was out for the count. Rip Van Winkle didn't feel the struggle and the strain. We, who are not way up dancing on the ceiling, who are paying attention, see the pain in society. We see the stresses and the strain of the population that we have. We see the changes of the racial makeup of our societies. maybe it would be easier if we just showed up when everything was done. But we've got to be the people, unlike Rip Van Winkle, who go out and do some chores, who do something useful of our lives and make something different of our society. We Unitarian Universalists pride ourselves on the ways in which we're so open, and yet decades ago when I first started in ministry, I had a high school 10th reunion, and I sat down with my friends and folks who were not my friends but somehow seemed to want to be friendly with me then, and talked about life. And people would say, oh, I'm doing this and that, I'm living here, and I've traveled there, and I've gotten married, or whatever else. And I talked about the struggle I had of being in a congregation in the South that said it was not prejudiced. And yet I looked out in the congregation and didn't see anything of the diversity of the city we were in. Nothing. Nothing that showed the diversity. We have videos that make sure that there are different races and cultures shown each time, because anybody who walks into this room who doesn't look exactly like us needs to see what? That we would accept, celebrate diversity here. There is a book out this year. It's not going to make the New York Times bestseller list because it's a very much Unitarian Universalist book. It's been out now for a couple of years. It's called Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism. And it was written by co-authors Nancy Palmer Jones and Karen Lynn, a white minister and a layperson of color, who explored 5 UU congregations' journeys towards becoming a beloved community. In Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism, from our own Unitarian Universalist Skinner House Press, they shared the joy, disappointment, and growth that these congregations found. That is the common read this year for Unitarian Universalists. You know, what's a common read? A common read is everybody can join in. You know that people all over, Unitarian Universalists all over, are studying a single book. Some of you who were at College Walk know that we revisited the common read called Breathe, a letter to my sons. And Manny Perry was talking to her sons about them growing up black in America. Well, this one is, Manny Perry gets to be a best-selling author, and it's generalized, and it's like everybody wants to buy that book. But this one is going to be harder. It's a harder sell. You're not going to show up and work and say, oh yeah, I'm reading about mistakes and miracles, about congregations that become multiculturalists. It's like, oh yeah, I'm reading that too. I got that on my Kindle. And it's like, this is something that we could do. This is something that if back in my 10th reunion, for my high school 10th reunion, I could say out loud again to those folks, not only I'm feeling uncomfortable about being in a congregation that I look out at and it says it wants diversity and it doesn't look it at all. And guess what? Now we have a book and a study guide that just got published this month. And thanks to Virginia, it's come forward to our adult RE that we're going to put it on the schedule. And I've already called Highland Books and started the process to see if they could get a bulk order of it. Because our adult RE folks said, why don't we toss some money to our local bookstore? Yeah, that's a good way of being in community. So we're going to see if that works. This is a big deal to have come this far away from the original to now and say, now we have a resource. Now we can learn from each other of folks who got to where they need to be. It's a big deal. The other big deal is congregations all throughout Unitarian Universalism has been voting in, all by themselves, the 8th principle. Now you can see the 7 principles that are all officially approved on the wall, multicolor thing in the social hall. The 8th principle adds to it, not just the inherent worth and dignity of each person, or support for one another in our spiritual growth, or the use of the democratic process, or the interdependent web of all existence. It's another one that has to do with understanding Unitarian Universalism. And a principle of being together is also anti-racist. Not just against prejudice. Not just the old ways of saying how we're bucking the old story in America. How we're living our lives individually, morally, but how we are working on institutional change in ways that make a difference. The book study may be a part of that. The study of the 8th principle, and I hope eventually this congregation embracing it is a big part of it. Almost every part of the vision of our congregation here, when it was written a few years ago, lifted up the 7 principles. 7 principles, 7 principles, 7 principles. What if during the revision of this, we talked about 8 principles? What if we talked about the way in which this allows us to understand how we walk spiritually with one another? It makes a huge difference, I think, not just to have a few pictures on the wall, but to say on our wall what we're doing to be something beyond tolerance, to be something beyond the word equality and work towards equity, to be something beyond just this. There are people who have been on the front lines of this in this congregation, I know that. There are folks who have sustained the local NAACP, who've shown up for Moral Mondays. There are folks who have turned out the vote in places where the underheard and undercounted live. And there are folks who donate and make a difference. But there's more work, tough work, study work. And maybe we can take it from a book and a discussion guide and into our ways of living. We did great things. I say we, you did it before I arrived, of becoming a welcoming congregation and having on the wall all the things that you committed to doing and putting it on the wall to becoming a welcoming congregation. And this is even beyond the work to be LGBTQ embracing, but welcoming to all. I've got a closing quote reading that I want to share with you. It tells me something about becoming whole. It's from this same book, the Black Lives UU book, by Viola Abbott, Towards a Place of Wholeness. I'm just going to leave you with a little bit of it. We're Unitarian Universalists. When we lift up our 7 principles, some think of them as a form of theology, but they're more important to our collective than that. They don't tell us what we should believe. They tell us how we should be. They tell us how we should act in the larger world with each other. We're brought here, right here today, by the fact that Unitarian Universalism has fallen short of the image that was presented to the world and to many of those who embrace this religion. But we're also brought here today by the truth that Unitarian Universalism has shifted course to move towards a place of wholeness, a place that has perhaps never existed for us as a denomination. I think we're a lot of change and we're a lot of the same. And the ways in which we look at exploring new is what will bring us joy. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open the doors. Open the doors. And know that people will see us for who we want to be. This wasn't the most uplifting, bounce around Bob sermon. You can turn your Christmas music back on when this is done. But don't forget, we pay attention. We change lanes. We figure out the way to move through our paths to become who we are. And it doesn't happen like Rip Van Winkle that we sleep through it all. We work on this revolution. Thank you. Now, I'd like to think that we who are here are not going to rest. In fact, that there is this fierce unrest in us. And so, in minor key, but a bit more upbeat than my sermon, I invite you to rise and sing together our final hymn this morning, one that you may not know quite as well, so Carlene's going to play it through all the way once, and I'm going to try to sing it out loud too. But our final hymn is number 304, A Fierce Unrest. It was the eager wish to soar that gave the gods their wings. There throbs through all the worlds that are this heartbeat hot and strong and shaken system, star by star, awake and glow in song. But for the urge of this unrest, these joyous fears are mute. But for the rebel in our breast, had we remained as brutes, when baffled lips demanded speech, speech trembled into birth. One day the lyric world shall reach from earth to laughing earth. From deed to dream, from dream to deed, from daring hope to hope. The restless wish, the instant need, still drove us up the slope. Sing we no governed firmament, cold ordered regular. We sing the stinging discontent that leaps from star to star. May you go out with the stinging discontent that leaps from star to star. May you have that fierce unrest at your core for the things that are and always have been that need change. May you be something of the light carried out into this world and back into this place too as you return with love. Blessing